Tell me what you did on the Suwannee. What was your duties? What was your
I was a
job?
medic in the medical division.
What did you usually have to? What kind of stuff did you have to deal with? Just colds and.
Oh yeah, I had sick call, and anybody that had any ailments, well, they came down, and you know, and they did operations and whatever. It was just a naval hospital on a ship. That's what it was. It had doctors and corpsmen and dentists and dental corpsmen, everything.
Wow, I didn't know they had. I wouldn't have thought dentists, but I guess
Yeah.
they would need them on there, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Talk to some of the men a little bit about October '44.
Yes, ma'am.
A few of those days. Can you tell me how you spent the time before? Y'all knew there was something coming, but not quite sure.
Well, with no experience in something like that happened to us, I didn't really know what to expect, and that's just it till it happened.
Tell me about what happened. What do you remember?
Well, I was my general quarters station was in the sick bay at that time. It had been other places, but at that time it was in sick bay when the first kamikaze hit. And of course, when it hit, why, you run out in the passageway to get to the hangar deck to see what was going on. And of course, I couldn't get to the hangar deck because the passageway was blocked with our buddies.
There were quite a few fires, or a pretty big fire that happened after that first.
Well, I would say, but I had no. I had things that the rest of the medical department had to do, and the fighting of the fires, I don't know too much about that, honey.
So you helped a lot of the men that were burned.
Oh, well, sure, yeah.
What did you have to do specifically?
Well, you had to treat them for shock and put something on their burns and wrap them up, and if they was and it according on how bad they were wounded, whether they went to the operating room or whether the corpsman took care of them, or you understand, it was a very, very confusing, not confusing, but just right down on top of you all at once.
Chaotic.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you work with in kind of getting the men prepared if they needed to be in surgery, or did you bandage wounds?
Well, if you went to surgery, there wasn't very much preparedness, because if you went to surgery and the doctors did what they could do to try to save the patient's life, and then you got somebody else in there just as quick as you could, hon. You didn't take an hour or two on, you know what I'm talking about, yeah. And it was very, very, well, to choose who should go first and who should go second was, it was, when you look back on it, it was very, very important to the patient to be judged by somebody that didn't have a doctor's degree. You understand, when they was laying out in the passageway and the doctor said, I want another patient, and you had to go out and choose who was next. And
that was your job?
Well, that was part of it, and it was everybody's job, you know. And of course, there was a unit up at forward of the ship too, and where Dr. Burwell was, and they had their problems. And of course, the sick bay was full, and we had to use the officers' mess hall, and just anywhere that we could get them to look after them, you know. And because it was a catastrophe, that's all.
During the recovery period before the ship headed home, were you pretty much just helping the victims before they
Well,
came
yes,
home?
yeah, we went back to an island and got them off, put them off on the hospital ship, you know. And of course,
How soon was that after the attack?
honey, I don't remember. It was, I don't remember how many days it was.
Mhm.
It wasn't too awfully long, but it was.
So did you stay? Y'all got the men off at the hospital ship, and then
Yes, ma'am.
and then what were your duties after that?
Well, trying to get everything organized again. And of course, Captain Parker was wounded as the second one, and he stayed on the ship because he didn't want to leave it, and he stayed there in sick bay. And of course, they was. I really don't remember whether there was any more that requested to stay on or not. That wasn't seriously wounded. You understand? It was. I don't really remember too much about that, honey, because it was. I don't know. You just had to prepare to clean up and get organized good again.
Yeah, some of the men were talking about how a lot of the discipline kicked in for everybody, and everybody knew what they needed to do, even if it wasn't their specific job.
Oh my Lord, yes, honey, because we couldn't have got all those guys up to sick bay if all the other people that were on the ship hadn't tried to take care of them and bring them up there. And you know, everybody was concerned about the wounded. They did what they had to do.
When did y'all finally get to head back home? Did you?
Well, it was after that we had transported the wounded off on this hospital ship that we came back to Bremerton to get repaired.
Which I understand there was 2 leaves. You could do 20 days, the first shift or the second shift.
Mm-hmm.
Did you take?
Now,
leave?
something, yeah, the first.
Yeah. Did you go back onto the Suwannee?
Yes, ma'am.
After that?
Yep.
What was that like for you to go back?
Scary.
That's what most of the men have said. It was hard putting y'all back on there.
Well, it was. Then you knew what could happen.
What'd you do on your leave?
I went home. I went home. Just visited with Dad and Mother and sisters and all the people that I knew, you know. Excuse me.
It's okay. What's it been like for you to meet again with the men of the Suwannee?
I wouldn't miss it for a farm in Texas. That's our vacation, my family's vacation.
Did you go
Because it's, well, I'm not intelligent enough to explain it, to put the words in it, but you can't, I don't know, honey. It's just, you know, the guys, it's just, and all their families and everything, and
Did you go to the
it's
first
just
one?
mind-boggling, huh?
Did you go to the first one?
Yes, ma'am. I've been to them all.
How was that?
Oh boy, something else. It was.
Had you kept in touch with any of the men?
Oh yeah. Well, most generally the Frenchie Gilchrist, and then most generally the guys that was in the medical department that I knew and had their phone numbers and addresses. I keep track of them, and or a few of them, not all of them now, because I don't know where all of them's at.
You've been to everyone since then?
Ma'am?
You've been to every one of them since then?
Every reunion?
Uh-huh.
Yes, ma'am. Yep.
Some of the men were talking about, you know, there were those 3 really hard days, and then there were a lot of good times. Y'all had a lot of fun
Oh
on
yeah.
leave, and
Yeah.
any stories you can tell for a
Oh
family
well,
viewing?
going over to the islands for the, you know, playing a little ball, and then on the basketball team on the ship, and when we was in harbors where we played different ships, and the movies, and I don't know, just, you know, just they tried to supply anything that would kind of ease your mind for a while, you know. And it was, I'm sure that it was as much as they could do too, you know. I don't know anything about running the ship, but I'm sure that they, you know what I mean. I mean, or that was my opinion of it anyway.
Some of the men have talked about going to, when they arrived at Pearl Harbor and the other ships, all the men, were you there for that? Were you there when they arrived in Pearl Harbor and all the other sailors were on their ships saluting the Suwannee?
No, honey, I heard somebody say something about it, but I don't remember. I was probably down in the medical department when we come in. I don't remember it, no.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is not unusual for me anymore.
What would you like for people to remember about your service and the service of the crewmen of the Suwannee? What would you like for them to know?
Just remember what they did for them, especially the boys that's buried at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. That they give up their life for something very, very important.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Really appreciate it.
All right, hon.
You're a hard guy to catch.
What?
I said you're a
Well,
hard guy to catch.
all right.